Let's get started. So for today's webcast, we'll be sharing with you what play-based learning looks like in a kindergarten classroom, what the research says about the importance of this type of learning for the development of the whole child, and how purposeful play supports and affirms other principles of developmentally appropriate practice. We'll take an in-depth look at how play supports children's investigative thinking and children's social-emotional development. But before we jump into that, I just wanted to acknowledge how fortunate I feel to have Mallory with us today, who's going to be able to share some real-life examples from her classroom where she implemented the creative curriculum for kindergarten last year. So let's get started. Constructive and purposeful play in the classroom is essential for children's learning in early childhood, in preschools, in kindergarten classrooms, and yes, even in first, second, and third grade classrooms. When children are learning through intentional play experiences, when they're exploring, investigating, and discovering new interests and new ideas, they're not only finding joy in learning, but they're also applying and building academic skills. When children have the time and space to play, to explore, they become the ones doing their own learning. They're following their interests, refining the focus of exploration, and setting the pace of their investigations. We know that it's not just what children learn at this age that matters, it's how they learn and how they come to feel about learning. It's so critical in these early years of school that we foster a love of learning that stays with children throughout their lives. Play-based learning does exactly that. So, Mallory, what have you seen as the effects of play in your room?
Play in my classroom makes learning meaningful to my students. What I've seen in my classroom as a play-rich environment is that all children feel and know that they are valued learners. In a play-based classroom, all children are able to show their strengths and build upon them, leading to even more strength. As we transition this year to a more play-based approach, one of the biggest things I saw was a more positive attitude coming from both the teachers and the students. The whole atmosphere of my classroom changed. In fact, the atmosphere across our school building has changed this past year. Teachers in the upper grades were so excited and inspired by what was happening in our kindergarten classrooms.
It's so great, Mallory, to hear the impact that it's having on some of the teachers in the upper grades, too. I know that was a question that some folks had even before the webinar about how they could help advocate for what we know is right in these preschool and kindergarten classrooms to see that move up. So that's great to hear that that was happening in your building. As children play and experiment, they begin to consider themselves and to treat and value themselves as learners. Play-based learning experiences, which are at the core of purposeful play, are child-directed, but with support of an engaging teacher who encourages children's emerging discoveries through play. The interactions between teachers and children during play are critical to children's learning. Teachers facilitate this learning as they carefully observe children's play in order to determine the most appropriate levels and types of support to offer. Only when children know that their play is important, that what they're exploring and wondering about is valued, will they take their investigations, their play, to an even deeper level, building a strong foundation for critical thinking and inquiry-based learning. As they play, students acquire language, learn to solve problems, learn to control their behavior and feelings, and explore social roles. Intentional and thoughtful play offers numerous opportunities for investigative learning in the classroom through real-world, hands-on experiences. Intentional and thoughtful play-based learning, which is really the hallmark of the creative curriculum classroom, helps you as a teacher to support your students to become creative, confident learners. When play in the classroom is part of a developmentally appropriate practice, it still includes clear classroom rules and expectations and a teacher who sets the example and joins in on children's play, and a daily schedule that ensures that there are blocks of time dedicated to continuous play. So, Mallory, why don't you tell us a bit about a typical day in your classroom?
Sure. In my classroom day, we begin a large group with a playful song or a chant, followed by an interactive read aloud. Then it's station time, where children are encouraged to pick stations and pursue activities that are based on what interests them. We, the teachers, intentionally set up activities and materials at the stations to encourage and entice students' investigations through play. A daily schedule and a classroom environment where children's interests are encouraged supports students' work and play and stimulates their imaginations and gives them ample opportunity to discover how exciting, stimulating, and joyful learning is and can continue to be, even when it's challenging. It's been my experience that when students are given the time to play, to explore, what we as teachers are doing is giving them the freedom to pursue what excites them, giving them ownership in their learning. They're able to explore and discover, and it's so clear the joy that they are getting out of these moments. And the parents and families love seeing how excited their children are with learning and how much joy the children are experiencing inside our classrooms.
Gosh, Mallory, that's so wonderful to hear, and it's been so lovely this past year as you've been using this tool to hear those real-life examples that have been taking place in your classroom. You know, the reality is that to some, a classroom only appears to provide learning opportunities when students are sitting at desks, observing a teacher at the front of the room. But, you know, this is a false perception, and too often teachers feel the need to have to defend the play of their students because it doesn't seem to have an academic purpose or is not as academically rigorous as someone may be looking for. What an outside observer could simply dismiss as children just playing with dolls is actually mathematics and literacy learning. Children might be placing the dolls with their various accessories into meaningful groups using recall strategies. Maybe they're assigning the dolls names of characters from a classroom book that was read aloud in the morning to be able to reenact the story, which aids in children's narrative development and narrative recall, which we know to be so important.
That's so true, Brianne. In my classroom, I've seen firsthand how play has supported children's math learning. When we play games like hopscotch or dancing along a number line, students are learning number counting, addition and subtraction, in a dynamic, hands-on, and fun way.
You're so right, Mallory. In a purposeful play-based program, teachers scaffold students' learning and extend students' knowledge through children's direct artistic and experiential activities and explorations. According to the researchers Miller and Allman from the Alliance for Childhood, play-based learning should be viewed as the antithesis of the one-size-fits-all model of education. Play supports the whole child. Having a child complete a worksheet may give me insight into his ability to match numerals to their quantity. Check. But that's it. That's all I can learn about a child from a worksheet, and it also provides a very narrow scope of math skill development for the child. If instead I were to engage with a small group of children in a dice game, all of a sudden there are so many more opportunities for me as the teacher and observer and for the children. So let's say Margot rolls the dice and then quickly calls out the numbers she's rolled. I rolled a 5 and a 6. Those are the biggest numbers. Margot then turns to Danielle and says, you get to roll next. I wonder if you'll get 2 6s. That'd be bigger than what I rolled. Danielle takes a turn, rolls the dice, and one of them falls on the floor. It's a 3. Margot looks at Danielle and encourages her to roll again. You should take another turn. It fell on the floor. That's not fair. You should try again. Maybe you'll get a bigger number. Instead of a worksheet where I would have been able to assess one skill, in this 60-second interaction, I'm able to not only observe Margot's skills related to number concepts and operations, but I'm now also able to observe her skills related to comparing and measuring, peer relationships, following directions, and balancing the needs and rights of others. Plus, Margot and Danielle are having fun. Margot will want to play this game again tomorrow or teach it to her family at home to engage in. And I can be honest, in my years of teaching, I never saw that from a worksheet. So, Mallory, why don't you talk about some of the ways, it was actually a question we got quite a bit before the webinar, around how a teacher might get started to start introducing some of these play experiences into their classroom.
If you're interested in bringing play-based experiences into the classroom, it's okay to start slow and to introduce play gradually. Change one part of your day and get familiar and comfortable with that before you attempt to rearrange or change the entire day. The Math and Game Station is a great place to start in building up play within your classroom. Children are learning math understanding as they roll dice, count spaces, and count out cards. It can feel like a big change to move from direct instruction to play-based learning. As you become more comfortable with play in the classroom, the more effective you are as a teacher in introducing meaningful play experiences within your classroom.
Thank you, Mallory, for those strategies. I think that's really important to give teachers digestible ways to get us started in their rooms. So now let's time and talk about what the research says. The benefits of play are well documented. Students in play-based kindergartens have higher academic outcomes and are more likely to become well-adjusted, healthy people. According to Vygotsky, in play, a child always behaves beyond his average age, above his daily behavior. In play, it's as though he were a head taller than himself. You yourself have hopefully seen and recognized the positive effects of play on student behavior and skill development in your classrooms. In a 2013 article from the American Journal of Play, researchers noted that play also helps children to learn to cooperate with others and engage in socially appropriate behavior. Play, specifically social play, gives students unique opportunities to explain their thinking to others, work creatively, and confidently experiment with new ideas. Purposeful play leads to what researchers Miller and Allman describe as enormous growth in all aspects of child development: cognitive, social emotional, imaginative, and physical. And they're developing language and math skills along the way. Their research shows that play is the primary tool through which children explore their interests, express their joys, and process their fears, disappointments, and sorrows. A recent research summary from Dr. Rachel E. White concludes that in the short and in the long term, play benefits cognitive, social, and emotional and physical development. Not only is play linked to these self-regulation skills, constructive, purposeful play is associated with other positive outcomes. Play also supports memory development. As children act out real-life scenarios in their play, they discover meaningful connections among information that they remember. It's so important for us as educators to remember this. As comes distracting all of the expectations out there for children to perform, play belongs in the classroom and has a key role in children's learning and development. We have to acknowledge that play and academics are not two things, requiring to be the singular focus at a time in the classroom. As educators and teachers, we have to consider that the classroom is and should always be about what researcher Elizabeth Grau deems playful learning and learningful play. Recent research on developmentally appropriate practices in kindergarten from Eva Phillips and Brian Sturm notes that children's first experience in a formal school environment set the stage for the attitudes about education that they and their families will carry with them throughout their lives. And it's therefore critical that children have a positive experience during one of these most important transitions in their lives, starting kindergarten.
As a kindergarten teacher, I know how important to children's engagement it is that they are encouraged to make connections back to literature, not just during the read aloud, but throughout my instruction. For children to build comprehension skills, it's critical that they have the opportunity to reflect on and engage with the socio-emotional themes, vocabulary, and character motivations from text in a variety of settings. One morning, we read a book about a gingerbread house. The children loved how the little boy had built a gingerbread house with his grandmother in the story. During our project learning time, many children gravitated towards the construction and makerspace station, where I always have blocks available for children to construct with. During station time, many of my students immediately went over and began to build their own gingerbread houses with the blocks, and began dramatic retellings of the story, and then started collaboratively expanding upon the story. It was so exciting to see.
Thank you for sharing that example, Mallory. And it makes it clear that play can't just be left to chance. This was teacher-guided. Mallory intentionally placed blocks within the classroom environment and gave the students time and space to engage with construction and socio-dramatic play. But after setting the stage with materials, Mallory took a back seat and let children's interests, dialogue, and ideas take center stage. The ownership of the activity was with the children, not with Mallory. In the article of This Thing Called Kindergarten, Elizabeth Grau notes that this type of teaching builds on the experiences children bring while being mindful of where they go in the future. It requires a delicate balance. The program and teachers must look backward, forward, and in the present simultaneously. She explains that the purpose of kindergarten is, as she puts it, to build on children's experiences, needs, and interests in a way that will enhance all domains of development and that's aligned with expectations in later grades. Mallory, can you talk for a minute about these expectations of upper grades? Because I think that's something that kindergarten teachers are really conscious of.
Sure. In my previous years teaching kindergarten, we expected children to be able to use prompts to write sentences by the end of the year. Actually, sometimes those expectations evolved into them being able to write paragraphs. As exciting as it was to be able to see my students do such great work, it was sometimes discouraging because the writing wasn't very meaningful to them. They were writing because there was a designated prompt and a clear expectation in place. Since the transition to using the creative curriculum and incorporating play-based learning, our students are still meeting these writing expectations. In fact, instead of writing paragraphs, they're composing books. Students regularly initiate sharing the information they learn through studies and books that they create themselves. It was so inspiring to see even students that would have struggled in the past to write one sentence being able to compose multiple sentences on a subject and even turn those into books for our classroom library. During our study of sports this past year, many students decided to create a book based on one of the sports that we had studied. They created a book cover stating the title and the author and illustrator. They then included information about their sport on each page of their book. Through this experience, students gained so much ownership of their own learning. As their teacher, I was able to see their deep understanding of the parts of a book, what an author and illustrator do, their writing ability, and even phonics skills within their writing, along with many other things. They were so proud of their work that we displayed those books outside of our classroom for everyone to enjoy. They truly found a love for learning.
Thanks, Mallory. Next, we're going to take a look at the 5 principles of developmentally appropriate practice. Purposeful play is as essential to children's learning, and we'll take a look at how that impacts our approach for the creative curriculum for kindergarten. So these 5 principles reaffirm and build upon each other in supporting the development and learning of the whole child. So we'll take a bit of a deeper look into how the principle that constructive purposeful play supports essential, how it interrelates and supports the 4 other principles of developmentally appropriate practice. Let's talk first for a minute about the principle that positive interactions and relationships with adults provide a critical foundation for successful learning. According to the Center on the Developing Child, children who have supportive, engaging, reliable, and consistent relationships with adults are more apt to build executive function capacities, such as working memory, mental flexibility, self-regulation, all of which are essential skills in school and in life. When caring adults encourage children's endeavors in a loving, supportive way, research shows that children recognize that their play, that their explorations, investigations are valued by their teachers and their family. Children feel empowered to explore and investigate. Next principle is that teacher-family partnerships promote the student in learning. The relationships that teachers form with children and families lead to positive learning experiences. And when teachers and families work together as partners in their child's learning, children know that they're lovingly supported by all of the important adults in their lives. This is still important in kindergarten. When children see their classroom learning as joyful, as fun experiences, they share this wonder and joy with their families. So Mallory, how did you see families respond to the shift to more play-based experiences in your classroom?
Families absolutely pick up on this joy, and they themselves find joy in their children's joy of learning. When parents know that their children are excited to learn, they find their children's learning exciting. This has made families even more comfortable being a part of the classroom environment and in the classroom experience. When their children are detailing what they have learned and what they have discovered, it helps families engage in back and forth conversations with their child. Parents feel more connected to the classroom and their children's learning and see themselves as partners in their children's learning. Our families love the study. They love learning from their children's investigations. Investigations of sports and seeds were in particular extra engaging for our families. A parent can't talk about a worksheet after the school day. They can't relate to the class being on page 54 in lesson 3, but they can talk about their children's discoveries through play. They can have these incredible discussions. In fact, it makes the parents a little nostalgic for their childhood. They love that their children are getting freedom and having those choices.
Gosh, Mallory, I love that. We've got to give families and children something to talk about, a way to start the conversation and the dialogue at home to continue the, like you said, the joy, but also the learning that's taking place, right? When we invite families to participate in those studies, then we continue to build on those skills at home in ways that are really engaging for children and their siblings and their families. The third principle is that social-emotional competence plays a significant role in school success. Children's physical and emotional well-being is closely linked to their ability to think and learn effectively in classrooms and other learning environments. Children with strong social-emotional support feel well cared for and are therefore open to constructive and purposeful play.
We've noticed in the kindergarten and first grade classrooms that attendance has improved. It's gone up tremendously, actually. Children are entering the classroom excited, and they don't want to leave at the end of the day. No more mornings of children reluctantly walking down the hallway to start the day. Children can't wait to come in the classroom and begin their investigative work. This is part of what I was speaking about earlier in regards to the overall atmosphere of our building changing, as we have shifted to a more play-focused environment.
Thanks, Mallory. I think we would all hope to have that visual of our buildings. The final principle focuses on investigative learning and how this discovery-rich learning leads to children's critical thinking. Often the impetus of children's in-depth investigations is sparked during these play experiences. During these playful learning experiences, children are able to continue to take on the role of active learners, which research shows is the most effective and developmentally appropriate way for students to learn. When students experiment, persist, work with others, and recognize their achievements, they're building social, emotional, and self-regulation skills along the way. The next piece we wanted to look at was taking a look at the connection of play to investigative learning. The sense of achievement of mastery over a challenge is a crucial step towards children's increasingly complex critical thinking and inquiry-based skills that they'll draw upon more and more in the later grades. Children have lots of questions, right? That's great. We want them to discover and to understand the answers to their questions. With the support and guidance of their teacher, they can learn to think and continue to work like scientists, explorers, investigators, and discoverers that they are. So let's take a look at how children can playfully investigate a topic. For this example, I'll share with you the sports study, one of the studies from the Creative Curriculum for Kindergarten, a study that Mallory and her students explored last year, and I think she shared that it was particularly engaging for families to participate in as well. The sports study includes 5 investigations that help children explore and learn about a variety of interesting sports. Each investigation helps students explore important concepts in science and social studies and strengthens skills in physical development, literacy, math, technology, and the arts. Each investigation question plays out over the course of the week. Students seek answers to the questions. Where are sports played? What are the rules of sports? What special clothing or equipment do people use to play sports? Who helps us learn how to play sports? What technology is used in sports? What's so incredible about children's study of sports is how play-based learning is embedded throughout each part of the day and is the foundation for students' project learning. So let's take a closer look at investigation 2 and how children's learning and discovery is supported by and furthered by play. So for investigation 2, what are the rules of sports? Project learning for day 1 encourages children to explore a variety of materials that could be used to create a game at the Discovery Station. They also have the option to explore and read books about sports at the Library Station. As children explore materials in the books on sports, they can begin to consider creating and planning their own classroom game. With teacher support, as they playfully engage with the bean bags, cups, balls at the Discovery Station, children can talk through their explorations and decide what kind of game they'd like to create for the classroom. Students at the Library Station, through their book explorations, will be considering the different rules of sports and which rules would be good additions to the rules for their classroom sport. For each investigation day, children are able to share what they've explored and learned during project learning. This gives children time to reconsider what was first discovered in the morning and then expand upon their learning and answer any questions from the teacher or other students. What's exciting about this project learning exploration of the rules of sports is that students are actively engaged in hands-on learning and are also engaged in critical thinking as they consider and create their own classroom game. In the sports study, this new game is thoughtfully considered by the students, researched and written about, materials designed, and then tried out and refined throughout the course of the investigation. Students build upon what students are learning throughout the study by returning to and refining the game. And then at the end of the study, students get to present this game to classroom visitors and play it during the celebration of learning, concluding the end of the study. Play-based learning experiences pave the way for children's intellectual discovery. For often in child-directed play with teacher support, the question that children are indirectly answering through their play exploration is, what do I want to find out? Implicit in this question is the understanding that children are taking the first steps as active, engaged, critical thinkers. Children bring an innate curiosity and scientific mind to the classroom. And research on student scientific observations and discovery proves what teachers already know. Children, even in the early elementary grades, are doing what professional scientists do. They become curious and want to learn more to find the answer. They observe, they investigate the how and why, and they reason through to solve a problem. The scientific investigations are obviously spurred by less conscious reasons than what motivates professional scientists, but what cannot be overstressed is how children's innate sense of curiosity about the world, the joy that they find it exploring and investigating and challenging themselves, is the foundation for their lifelong learning and their path to becoming critical thinkers and learners.
During our sports study, my students became interested in learning about other sports that were not as common as baseball, football, and basketball. We had read the story, Happy Like Soccer, and that inspired my students' interest in soccer, which then led to a discussion about other sports that we may not be as familiar with. I invited a rugby player from our local university to come visit my class and read a story with my students. After he read the story, he shared photos of himself in his uniform for the students to see. He talked with them about the game and shared how it was a mixture of football and soccer. He helped the children learn to see the differences in soccer, football, and rugby as we compared and contrasted the different sports. He allowed students to ask questions, and he interacted with them as they showed him their projects that they had worked on the different sports. The students really enjoyed his visit as they discovered a sport that they had never heard of before or had any experience with.
Mallory, that's such a great example of incorporating people from the local community into the classroom. What Mallory's not sharing, that she shared with me a couple days ago, is that she couldn't get this brother to leave. He was having such a great time engaging with the students in the classroom, and they enjoyed his presence so much he spent the whole day there, which has a whole other umbrella of great benefits as well. So when children are given daily opportunities like the ones Mallory just described, to play, to investigate, to explore, their experimentations and exploration of new ideas, new knowledge, new loves and interests will flourish. Brain research shows that the cognitive, emotional, and social capabilities of children are intertwined. Just as academic learning and play cannot be separated, academic learning and play cannot be separated from social emotional development. Complex sociodramatic play is linked to the development of self-regulation and may be particularly beneficial for children who are impulsive or who are less advanced in self-regulatory development. Private speech or self-talk, another component of dramatic play, is an important part of developing self-regulation skills. Strong teacher-child relationships also support children's learning and development through play by providing students with a loving and supportive base for exploring new ideas. Research stresses the importance of this supportive engagement between teachers and children. Students will know that their enthusiasm for learning is welcomed and that they as learners are in a place where they can discover and investigate. Students who feel secure in their classroom community are well equipped to succeed as learners. Nurturing children's social and emotional development is not separate from academic instruction. Because students have stronger outcomes in classrooms where there's a strong connection between teacher and child, students will continue to view teachers as valuable resources and powerful supporters of their growth and development. Play-based learning with a supportive, caring teacher ensures that children have and know they have ownership in their learning. The opportunity for choice during play experiences allows children to begin to see themselves as active learners who can direct their own learning. Research emphasizes how this active learning, having opportunities to make choices in the classroom, strengthens not only the children's social and emotional development, but nurtures and inspires their creativity as well. Thank you so much for joining us and taking a closer look at how meaningful, constructive, purposeful play is in the classroom and how it supports thriving, joyful, excited learners. And we want to thank you for the important work that you're doing in nurturing students' development and their love of learning. So we're going to take a few minutes now to answer some of the questions. So one question that actually came in for us ahead of the webinar that I'd love to share with you first, Mallory, is around how do we navigate getting our administrators on board? I think we have some kindergarten teachers on the line who are on board with this approach, but maybe feel that they don't have support of administrators or leadership in their building to make the shift that you made last year to a more play-based approach. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Actually, ours has been very supportive, but I think one way is to invite them in, show them some ideas that you have, and definitely have an open dialogue with them about what they're seeing within your classroom. Let them know that they're not only seeing play, but all those different areas that they're being able to see. If you help them understand what they're seeing, I think they're a lot more likely to be on board with this approach.
That's great, Mallory. I think that's such a critical point of having them come in and see the classroom, right? I think oftentimes our administrators may not have had as much experience in early childhood. When Mallory and I were chatting the other day, a lot of times these are administrators that have, maybe their prior assignment was in a high school environment or a middle school environment, and really getting to come and be a part of the learning. It's one thing to come and observe for a little bit, but it's another part to spend a good bit of time there and engage in some of the experiences that are happening so they can hear that rich vocabulary and they can see children working through their process skills. I would also share, we mentioned it at the beginning of the webinar, but under the Event Resources tab above the slides, there are some links to, there's a ton of great research out there that supports the power of play, but specifically some of the research quotes that I used in this webcast. There's links to where you can find more of that kind of information. So it could be helpful for you to just read some of that information and then share some of that back with your administrator on how this is a research-proven approach to best support children through developmentally appropriate practice. Mallory, another question that we heard quite a bit around was families, that sometimes families get nervous when they hear about play happening and is enough learning taking place. So talk to us a little bit about what you saw in the last year related to that.
What we've really done to help our families understand is before school starts, we have a program that's called Jump Start where we invite the families in. And we introduce the gold tool to them. We introduce this new approach to learning for their students. We try to help them understand what we're seeing and that we're not only assessing their child on academic skills, but also on their physical and emotional skills. And I think once they understand and they see what a powerful tool we're using and that we can help them at home with some things that maybe they're struggling with, I think they definitely get on board and are just excited as we are about it.
I think that's great, Mallory, and I think this idea of having families have exposure to this before the school year even starts and seeing the enthusiasm of you as the educator and seeing the environment that you've built in the classroom and being able to have a visual, even before that first day of school, of getting excited about the kind of things that are going to be taking place. I was having a conversation with some of my colleagues as we were working on some resources for first through third grade and talking through really that families, we have to think about what's important, right? And we think about defining rigor, what does that mean? And how when families through conversations that we're helping to facilitate at home can hear that rich vocabulary that a child's using and can see some of those math concepts in action through a game and through problem solving, it can be that much more powerful. So one of the questions I'm going to jump in and answer here that has come through online was asking if this can be used in a preschool classroom. So absolutely, play is absolutely the center of a preschool classroom. We have a separate curriculum offering for preschool students, the creative curriculum for preschool, and that actually has been around for many years. The creative curriculum for kindergarten is new, but the same approach to project-based investigations, the study topics look a little bit different. In kindergarten, we're investing things like architecture and and seeds in the grocery store and sports. In the preschool environment, we actually have more studies to choose from, and we're studying things like trees, buildings, exercise, pets, roads. So there's a whole other solution there for preschool, but you'll see a lot of similarities too. All the research that supports this being the best way for children to learn, you'll find a lot of consistency there. But the glimpse of the plans and things that we shared, that's specifically designed to fit into a kindergarten day. Mallory, one of the other things I'm seeing come through is talking about materials, right? So I'm a new teacher, or a teacher, maybe I'm an experienced teacher, but I'm trying to make the shift. And oftentimes preschool classrooms come stocked with all of these things that make play very easy. But maybe as a kindergarten teacher, I don't have access to some of these materials to feel like I can get started with play.
Yeah, we ran into that really starting this off. Something we did is we kind of reached out to our community. We have a small community, but it's a very active community. So we kind of put it out there on Facebook. We sent out some community letters to the parents, especially of those incoming kindergarten students. And we let them know that we were making a shift and that we would love some donations of things. We had a list of things we would like Legos and blocks, Play-Doh and paint, things that might be used within our sensory bins. And the community really, really pitched in and helped and donated tons of things, more than we could really use. And we were really set for that beginning of school year without having to purchase anything or go out and get anything new.
Gosh, that's great. You've got such a great community there. I think there are some on the phone that may feel, gosh, yes, that's something our community would support, and there may be others that might be a little bit more difficult. One thing I would point out from having introduced studies when I was a director of a preschool program is when we also think about play that's happening and the investigative work that we talked about, you don't necessarily need all of the bells and whistles and the manipulatives, right? If I'm doing a study on percussion instruments, well, my empty milk jug or my empty glue gallon and the bucket that we use, those become percussion instruments and rubber bands. And so there's lots of ways that we can bring in real-life experiences. If I'm doing a game with sorting and classifying and counting and stacking and all of that, I don't need to have the manipulative from the teacher store to do that. I can use a pin of buttons. And in a lot of ways, I think that helps the transition to children taking some of this learning and play home, that you don't need the special set of things to build, construct, count, sort, play, but just found objects can do that. So I think that makes it a little easier for children to take some of this home. So I think hopefully that answers that question of getting some more of those things into your classroom. Mallory, one question that someone came in specifically for you was just talking about sort of your collective team of kindergarten teachers. So is this something that you, attacked sounds like an aggressive word, is this something you collaborated on together to make this shift in your program? So talk to us a little bit about what that looked like.
Yes, it is. There's 3 kindergarten teachers in my school, and so we did not, at the time that this began, we did not have a preschool within our school. Some other schools within our county had preschool, had a K-4 program, but we did not, and we were really looking to hopefully entice that to come to our school. So we started looking at some ways that we could help maybe a preschool come here and the way that things were being taught in a preschool classroom. We knew that what we were doing within our kindergarten classroom, we didn't feel like it was developmentally appropriate. We were missing some of our students because we weren't addressing their physical needs or their emotional needs, like we were addressing all those academic skills. So we started kind of looking to see what else we could do. What did we need to do to approach and figure those things out? And so our state does use a GOLD tool for the pre-K classroom. And so we were approached as using it for a kindergarten entry assessment. And once we started using it just for that very beginning entry assessment, we fell in love with the program and we fell in love with the concepts, and we just kind of carried it on throughout the year. We approached our administration and talked to them about it, and they, like I said, they were very open and very supportive, and they've continued to be. They have been a huge part in our classrooms. like you said before, they do come in and they do play with our kids. They do interact with them. So they know exactly what's going on in here, and it's been a huge growth for us, definitely.
Thank you, Mallory. I know we already answered the administrator question a little bit earlier, but it got me thinking, Mallory, when you were saying about the administrator coming in and actually playing, something that I remember from my years teaching elementary school, sometimes it's helpful, too, to give the administrator something to do, right? Like,
yeah.
They feel like they have an experience to lead, they have an interactive read aloud, you can give them, the week ahead of time to read and practice their voices, or,
right.
a movement activity that you want to lead. I think sometimes we have to help them a little bit, have that confidence to come in and be an active role. Certainly there are administrators that absolutely do not need that, but you might have an administrator that would really welcome an opportunity to play a little bit more of an active role, but giving them some prep time to understand really the intentionality of what goes into the experiences that you're offering. So just as a reminder, we'll take another minute or two to answer questions. Some of the questions that folks have sent through are really specific to their particular district or state, so we can reach out to you separately on that to get you answers to the question. I see one that came through around outdoor time and how we can incorporate play there. I think that's such an obvious win, right? Especially as Mallory offered that strategy about, yes, you can go all the way and transition to something like project-based investigations and really decide that's going to be the anchor of what's happening in your classroom, or maybe you already have a mandated, curriculum that you're needing to use this next school year and you're just trying to layer in opportunities for play. Outdoor time is a great way to do that. It's when children are a dedicated time, ideally already, for them to be moving their gross motor muscles and engaging in some peer interactions, but we can be even a little bit more intentional about the kind of experiences we provide for outdoor time, and maybe even getting to go outside more than what's on the mandated school schedule, but we know children definitely benefit from some additional exposure to outside. If you're using the creative curriculum for kindergarten, or if you're using GOLD, now within my teaching strategies, you have access to some of our intentional teaching experiences, which are designed for small group instruction primarily as the focus, but absolutely can be used in large group instruction as well. A lot of those translate very easily to go outside. Many of our classroom experiences, we just take a basket of some materials outside or just use found items on the playground to be able to engage in that. So I think oftentimes outdoor play is a missed opportunity to engage children in some content-rich play as well. All right, so with that, I'm going to thank Mallory one more time. Mallory is her first week back. You heard she had Jumpstart yesterday, and she's sitting in her classroom as we speak with, I'm sure, lots of things to do to get everything set up. So Mallory, I do really, really value and appreciate that you took the time to join us today, and I thank all of you. I know this is some of the busiest weeks of the school year, so thank you for taking the time to join us today.
Well, thank you for allowing me.
Have a great afternoon.